When billionaire CEO Lucian Hart's private letter about grief and loneliness accidentally lands in the hands of Brooklyn teacher Noel James, an unexpected correspondence begins. But can love built on paper survive the real world? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning rain hit the windows of Lucian Hart's penthouse office. At 30 years old, he had built Mindwell Technologies into a billion-dollar company, but success hadn't filled the emptiness inside him. His office took up the entire top floor of the building, yet he barely used most of it. He preferred the corner where his desk faced the wall, instead of the floor-to-ceiling windows, with their spectacular view of Manhattan. "Mr. Hart, I've brought the quarterly reports," said Margaret, his executive assistant, placing a stack of folders on his desk. Lucian didn't look up from his computer screen. "Just leave them there." Margaret hesitated. "Also, the charity gala committee called again. They really want you to attend the mental health fundraiser next month. Tell them I'll make a donation, double whatever they're asking for." "They don't want your money, Mr. Hart. They want you. You're the face of mental health innovation." Lucian finally looked up, his blue eyes cold. "I'm not the face of anything, Margaret. That's why we have a PR team. Send them instead." After Margaret left, Lucian turned to the small silver frame on his desk, the only personal item in his sterile office. It held a photo of a smiling teenage girl with the same blue eyes as his, Emily, his little sister, 5 years gone now. The memories came rushing back as they always did. Emily's laughter, the way she'd tap on his bedroom door at night when she couldn't sleep. The phone call he'd ignored the night she took her own life because he was too busy closing his first major deal. Lucian closed his eyes. The guilt never went away. It just changed shape. That night, Lucian couldn't sleep. The penthouse apartment felt too big, too empty. He wandered into his study at 3 a.m. and sat at his desk. Without thinking, he pulled out a sheet of stationery and a pen. He hadn't written a letter by hand in years. Who even did that anymore? But the words came pouring out. "To whoever might understand, I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe because it's easier to talk to no one than to someone. I run a company that helps millions of people with their mental health, but I can't fix my own broken pieces. I lost someone I loved because I wasn't there when she needed me. Now I live behind screens and emails and assistants because it's safer that way. Nobody gets close. Nobody sees how damaged I really am. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be known, really known by another person, to let someone see all the jagged edges and still choose to stay. But I'm afraid that kind of love doesn't exist for someone like me. Is it possible to be both terrified of being alone and terrified of letting someone in? Because that's where I live, in that impossible space between two fears. I'm sorry for putting these thoughts on paper. They don't belong anywhere else." A ghost who used to be a man, Lucian stared at the letter, surprised by his own raw honesty. He folded it and slipped it into an envelope. He had no intention of sending it. It was just a way to release the pressure in his chest. He addressed it to no one at his own business address, thinking he'd just throw it away in the morning when his head was clearer. The next day was chaos at the office. Margaret was juggling calls from investors. The development team needed approvals for the new app update, and the marketing department was waiting on Lucian's feedback for the upcoming campaign. "I need these signed and mailed today," Margaret said, placing a stack of envelopes on Lucian's desk, not noticing that she had picked up the personal letter he'd left there. Lucian nodded without looking, already focused on the crisis with the app development. By the time he remembered the letter, Margaret had already sent out the mail. "Did you mail everything that was on my desk?" he asked, suddenly alarmed. "Yes, sir." "Is there a problem?" Lucian shook his head. "No, it's fine. What did it matter?" The letter would be returned as undeliverable since it wasn't addressed to a real person, but Margaret had been distracted that morning. She hadn't noticed that the address on one envelope was incomplete. When she added the missing zip code, she accidentally typed 11211 instead of 111. Not Manhattan, but Brooklyn. Noel James climbed the stairs to her third-floor apartment in Brooklyn, exhausted after a long day of teaching poetry to high school students. At 28, she had already experienced enough heartbreak to fill several poetry collections. "You've got mail," called her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who was watering the plants in the hallway. "I signed for a package and there was a letter too." "Thanks, Mrs. Rodriguez, probably just bills." Inside her apartment, Noel dropped her bag and kicked off her shoes. The small one-bedroom was filled with books, plants, and framed poems, her sanctuary after the storms of the past few years. She sorted through the mail, bills as expected, a postcard from her friend traveling in Europe, and an elegant cream-colored envelope with an address she didn't recognize. The addressee simply read no one, but somehow it had made its way to her building with the wrong apartment number. "Weird," she murmured, turning the envelope over. No return address. She should probably just throw it away. But curiosity got the better of her. Noel carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. As she read, her heart began to race. The words could have been pulled from her own journal. That same loneliness, that same fear of being truly seen, that same impossible space between wanting connection and fearing it. By the time she finished reading, tears were streaming down her face. Not because it was romantic, because it sounded like her, like the words she couldn't bring herself to say out loud after Marcus had walked out when her mother got sick. When she needed him most, he'd decided her life was too complicated and disappeared. Noel read the letter again. Who was this person? This ghost who used to be a man? Without thinking too much about it, she grabbed a notepad and began to write. 3 days later, Lucian was in the middle of a video conference when Margaret interrupted with a strange look on her face. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hart, but this just arrived for you. It's unusual." She handed him a pale blue envelope, addressed simply to the ghost who used to be a man at the Mindwell Technologies address. Lucian's heart skipped a beat. He excused himself from the meeting and took the envelope to his private office. Inside was a handwritten letter on simple stationery. "Dear Ghost, your letter wasn't meant for me, but somehow it found its way to my door. I should probably apologize for reading something so personal, but I can't bring myself to be sorry because your words reached across the emptiness and touched something in me that's been silent for too long. To whoever you are, you're not unlovable. You're just hiding too well. I know because I've been hiding too. It's safer behind walls, isn't it? No one can hurt you there, but no one can love you there either. The person you lost, that wasn't your fault. I need you to hear that. We can't save everyone, even when we love them with our whole hearts. I've learned that lesson the hard way. I don't know why I'm writing back to a stranger. Maybe because you don't feel like a stranger. Maybe because sometimes it's easier to be honest with someone you'll never meet. If you ever want to write back, you can, or you can let this strange connection fade away. Either way, thank you for your accidental honesty. It made me feel less alone tonight." Another ghost who's trying to remember how to live, Lucian, read the letter 3 times, his hands trembling slightly. Someone had read his most private thoughts. Someone had responded with kindness instead of judgment. Someone understood. He should be angry about the privacy breach. He should ignore it. Instead, he found himself reaching for a pen. Noel didn't expect a response. She had acted on impulse, writing to a stranger who had accidentally bared his soul to her. So when another cream-colored envelope arrived a week later, her heart raced as she tore it open. "Dear fellow ghost, I don't know how my letter found you, but maybe it knew where it needed to go better than I did. Your words have been echoing in my head for days. You said I'm not unlovable, just hiding too well. I've never thought about it that way. Hiding has become so natural that I sometimes forget I'm doing it. My company has 500 employees, and I couldn't tell you the names of more than a dozen. I built walls so high that I trapped myself inside them. You're right about the person I lost. Logically, I know it wasn't entirely my fault, but logic doesn't ease the guilt. She was my little sister. I was supposed to protect her. I missed the signs because I was too focused on building something important. Now I have everything I thought I wanted, and it means nothing without her. I hope you don't mind me asking, but what did you mean when you said you learned the hard way that we can't save everyone? You don't have to answer. I just found myself wanting to know more about the person whose words made me feel human again, even if just for a moment. A ghost who's grateful for your reply." Noel sat on her couch, the letter pressed to her chest. She hadn't expected the connection to feel so real, so immediate. Before she could overthink it, she grabbed her notepad and began writing back. Over the next 2 months, the letters continued. They arrived weekly, sometimes twice weekly. Lucian and Noel poured their hearts onto paper, sharing their wounds, their fears, their small daily victories. They never exchanged names or specifics about their lives. It was safer that way, more honest somehow. Margaret noticed the change in Lucian. He still worked long hours, still avoided public appearances, but there was something different about him, a softness around the edges. Once, she even caught him smiling at his desk as he read one of the blue envelopes. "These letters seem to be good for you," she commented one day. Lucian quickly tucked the latest letter into his drawer. "They're just personal correspondence. You know, you could use email like everyone else in the 21st century. Some things deserve more than email." he replied quietly. Margaret smiled. Whoever they are, they're bringing back the Lucian I used to know. Before, she didn't need to finish. Before Emily. Before the walls went up. In Brooklyn, Noel's students noticed a change too. Her poetry lessons had always been passionate, but lately they had a new energy, a new depth. "Miss James, you're different," said Zoe, one of her seniors, after class one day. "You seem happier." Noel smiled. "Do I?" "Yeah, like you've remembered something important that you forgot for a while." That night, Noel wrote her next letter with a bold step forward. She included a poem, one she had published in a small literary magazine called Whispers 2 years earlier. It was about emerging from darkness, about the first tentative steps back toward light after a long time in shadow. "I'm sharing a piece of myself with you," she wrote at the end of her letter. "A fragment of my heart that exists in the world. Maybe someday we'll be brave enough to step out of these shadows completely." When Lucian received the letter with the poem, something shifted in his chest. The words were hauntingly familiar. He walked to his bookshelf and pulled out a thin literary magazine, Whispers, issue 17. He subscribed to several small poetry publications, a private passion he'd never shared with anyone. He flipped through the pages until he found it, the exact same poem attributed to Noel James. Lucian sat down heavily in his chair. Noel James. He knew her work. He had 5 issues with her poems, had read them countless times during his sleepless nights. And now he realized he had been corresponding with her for months. Without thinking, he opened his laptop and searched her name. There she was. A faculty photo from Brooklyn Heights Academy. Dark skin, warm eyes, a smile that reached all the way to those eyes. "Noel," he whispered, testing the name on his lips. For days he debated what to do. Should he tell her he knew who she was? Would she feel betrayed? Would this magical connection they'd built through words disappear once reality intruded? On a crisp fall afternoon, Lucian found himself standing across the street from Brooklyn Heights Academy. He told himself he just wanted to see her once, from a distance. No contact. No disruption to the sanctuary they'd built in their letters. The final bell rang, and students poured out of the building. Then he saw her, Noel James, standing at the top of the steps, laughing with a group of students. She wore a bright yellow scarf that caught the autumn sunlight. Her presence was magnetic, radiant, more alive than anyone he'd seen in years. A student said something that made her throw her head back in laughter, and Lucian felt it like a physical touch. This was the woman whose words had been saving him, letter by letter. This was the person who understood his broken places without ever having met him. He watched her for 10 minutes, memorizing the way she moved, the animated gestures of her hands as she spoke. Then he turned and walked away, his heart pounding with equal parts fear and longing. That night, he wrote the most difficult letter yet. "Dear Noel, yes, I know your name now. Your poem, it was published in Whispers. I've been a subscriber for years. I've read your work before, admired it from afar, and now I discover you're the ghost who's been writing to me, understanding me in ways no one else ever has. I hope you can forgive this small invasion of your privacy. I haven't looked for more information about you, just your name, just your poem. I've been thinking about what you said in your last letter, about someday being brave enough to step out of the shadows completely. I want that. I'm terrified of it, but I want it. Would you meet me? In person. There's a small park near the Brooklyn Promenade. This Saturday at 2 p.m. by the old oak tree near the entrance. You'll recognize me because I'll be holding your latest letter. If you don't come, I'll understand. What we've built in these pages has been the most real thing in my life for a long time. I wouldn't blame you for wanting to preserve it, untouched by reality. Either way, thank you for seeing me, the real me, through nothing but words on paper." Last he signed his real name for the first time, then sealed the envelope with trembling hands. Noel read his letter with her heart in her throat. He knew who she was, had sought her out through her poem, wanted to meet in person. Part of her was afraid that the magic would disappear once they stood face to face, afraid that the connection that had sustained her these past months would evaporate in the harsh light of reality. But a stronger part of her was ready to see if the man behind the letters was as real as his words had been. Saturday arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze. Noel changed her outfit 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress and her favorite denim jacket. She tucked his latest letter into her pocket and headed for the park, her stomach fluttering with nervous energy. The oak tree was easy to spot. Noel arrived 5 minutes early and found a bench nearby, her eyes scanning the path for anyone who might be him. 2 o'clock came and went, 10 minutes passed, then 20. At 2:30, Noel began to wonder if he had changed his mind. Had the idea of meeting her in person been too much? Had reality intruded on their perfect paper world? What she didn't know was that Lucian was there, watching from the shadows of a nearby cluster of trees. He had arrived early, positioned himself where he could see the meeting spot. When she appeared, even more beautiful up close than she had been from across the street, something like panic had seized his chest. What if she was disappointed? What if she looked at him and saw only the wealthy CEO, not the broken man who had spilled his soul in those letters? What if this perfect connection shattered the moment they spoke actual words to each other? So he stood frozen, watching her wait, watching hope gradually fade from her face, watching her check her watch, then her phone, watching her finally stand to leave. And then he did the thing he would come to regret most. He turned and walked away, back to the safety of his walls and his silence. Noel returned home, the letter still in her pocket, a heaviness in her chest that hadn't been there that morning. She pulled out a sheet of paper and wrote one final letter. Lucian, if you ever want to stop hiding, my door's open, but only if you knock like a man, not a ghost. Noel. She included her address, then mailed the letter before she could change her mind. Weeks passed with no response. The silence was answer enough. Whatever had existed between them wasn't strong enough to survive in the real world. Noel tried to accept it, to move on, to return to the life she had before his letter had accidentally found her. But something had changed. She had changed. Even if their connection ended here, his words had woken something in her that had been sleeping too long. One rainy night, Noel sat curled on her couch with a book of poetry and a cup of tea, listening to the storm raging outside. The sound of thunder nearly drowned out the knock at her door. She wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment she considered ignoring it, but the knock came again, more insistent this time. Noel set down her book and went to the door. When she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. There he stood, soaked from the rain, his expensive coat dripping onto the hallway floor. His blue eyes, so familiar from her dreams yet completely new, were full of terror and hope in equal measure. I wrote the letter, he said, his voice rough with emotion. But it's your words that made me feel human again. Noel didn't speak. She just stepped aside and let the door open a little wider. The rain pounded against the windows as Noel and Lucian stood facing each other in her small apartment. Water dripped from his coat onto her welcome mat, forming a small puddle at his feet. You're soaked, Noel said, breaking the silence. Let me get you a towel. She disappeared into the bathroom, grateful for the moment to collect herself. When she returned with a faded blue towel, Lucian was still standing in the same spot, as if afraid to move further into her space. Thank you, he said, taking the towel. His voice was deeper than she had imagined, with a slight roughness to it. You can hang your coat there, she said, pointing to a hook by the door. As he removed his coat, Noel took in the man who had been writing to her soul for months. Tall, with broad shoulders and a lean frame, dark hair that curled slightly from the rain, and those eyes, intense blue, with shadows beneath them that spoke of sleepless nights. I wasn't sure you'd let me in, Lucian said, running the towel over his hair. I wasn't sure either, she admitted. Why did you come tonight? Why not at the park when we were supposed to meet? Lucian's eyes dropped to the floor. I was there. What? I was there at the park. I saw you waiting. I just couldn't make myself walk over to you. Noel felt a flash of anger. You watched me sit there for half an hour and didn't say anything? I know it was cowardly, he said, meeting her eyes again. I've spent so long hiding behind letters and screens that I panicked. I was afraid that once you saw me, once we actually spoke, the connection we had would disappear. So you decided to make that decision for both of us. She crossed her arms over her chest. Do you know how it felt to sit there waiting, wondering if I'd been a fool to believe in whatever this is between us? I'm sorry, Lucian said, his voice barely above a whisper. I've been sorry every day since. That's why I'm here now, because I couldn't live with being a ghost anymore, not after your last letter. The anger in Noel's chest softened slightly. Would you like some tea? You look cold. He nodded, relieved at the small gesture of hospitality. In the kitchen, Noel put the kettle on and tried to steady her nerves. Lucian Hart was in her living room. The man whose words had reached across the emptiness and touched her heart was a real person, standing a few feet away. Part of her wanted to run to him, to see if the connection they'd built on paper translated to real life. Another part wanted to guard her heart, to remember how it felt when he didn't show up at the park. When she returned with 2 mugs of tea, Lucian was looking at her bookshelves, his fingers trailing over the spines of her poetry collections. "You have a beautiful home," he said, accepting the mug she offered. "It feels like you. Warm, full of words. How would you know what I'm like? We've never met until now." The words came out sharper than she intended. "Haven't we?" Lucian asked softly. "I've seen more of your soul in those letters than I've seen of most people I've known my whole life." Noel sank onto the couch, curling her legs beneath her. "Sit, please. You're making me nervous standing there." Lucian chose the armchair across from her, perching on the edge as if ready to flee at any moment. "I should explain who I am." "Lucian Hart," she said. "I looked you up after you signed your name in that last letter. CEO of Mindwell Technologies. One of the youngest billionaires in the country." His face fell slightly. "Yes, that's what the world sees." "And what should I see?" she asked. "Just Lucian. Just the man who wrote those letters." He took a sip of tea, gathering his courage. "The man who lost his sister to depression and has been trying to atone for it ever since." "Tell me about her," Noel said gently. Lucian's eyes grew distant. "Emily. She was 17 when she died. 5 years ago now. She was so bright, so full of life. At least that's what I thought. But she was fighting battles I never saw because I was too busy building my company." "That's what you meant in your first letter, about not being there when someone needed you." He nodded. The night it happened, she called me. I was in the middle of closing a major deal, so I silenced my phone. I told myself I'd call her back in an hour. By then, it was too late." Noel's heart ached for him. "Lucian, you couldn't have known." "I should have," he insisted. "There were signs. Her withdrawing from friends, the changes in her behavior. But I was so focused on making Mindwell successful that I missed what was happening right in front of me. The irony isn't lost on me, building a mental health app while my own sister was suffering. Is that why you're so reclusive? Why you hide behind assistants and screens?" "Partly," he admitted. "After Emily died, I threw myself into work. I expanded Mindwell to include suicide prevention resources, depression screening tools. I told myself I was honoring her memory, but really, I was hiding from my guilt." He set his mug down, his hands trembling slightly. "I don't know how to be around people anymore. Every interaction feels like walking through a minefield. What if I miss something important again? What if someone needs me and I fail them like I failed her?" "So you built walls," Noel said softly. "The highest I could manage." His eyes met hers. "Until your letter somehow found a way through." The rain continued to drum against the windows, creating a cocoon of sound around them. For a moment, neither spoke. "Your turn," Lucian finally said. "In your letters, you mentioned someone who left when your mother got sick. What happened?" Noel took a deep breath. She hadn't talked about Marcus in a long time. "His name was Marcus. We were together for 3 years. I thought we were headed toward marriage, a life together. Then my mum was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer." She traced the rim of her mug with her finger. "Suddenly, my life was doctor appointments and chemotherapy sessions. I was teaching full-time and taking care of her in every spare moment. Marcus said he understood that he would be there for me. For about 2 months he was. And then? Then he started complaining that we never spent time together anymore. That I was always tired, always distracted. One night, after a particularly bad day at the hospital, he told me that this wasn't what he signed up for, that my life had become too complicated. He was gone the next day." Lucian's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry. He sounds like a coward." "He was," Noel agreed. "But the worst part wasn't that he left. It was that I started to believe him, that I was too much, too complicated, too broken for anyone to love. That's what I meant in my letter when I said I understood hiding. After Marcus left and my mother eventually recovered, I built my own walls. I decided it was safer to be alone than to need someone who might not be there when it mattered. Until my letter somehow found a way through." Lucian echoed her earlier words, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Something like that," Noel admitted, returning his smile. "Those letters became the one place where I could be completely honest, where I didn't have to pretend to be strong or together or fine." "I know exactly what you mean," Lucian said. "I have 500 employees, a board of directors, investors watching my every move. But those letters to you were the only time I felt like I could breathe." Their eyes met across the small living room, and something electric passed between them. Recognition, understanding, possibility. "So what happens now?" Noel asked. "Now that we're not just words on paper?" Before Lucian could answer, his phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. He glanced at it and frowned. "I'm sorry, I have to take this. It's my assistant." He stepped into the hallway. and Noel could hear the low murmur of his voice. When he returned, his expression had changed. "There's an emergency at the company, a security breach in our patient data system. I have to go." The regret in his voice was evident. "Of course," Noel said, trying to hide her disappointment. "I understand." Lucian hesitated at the door. "This conversation isn't over. Can I see you again?" "You know where to find me now," she replied. "No more letters needed. I'd like to take you to dinner tomorrow night. A proper date. Would that be okay?" Noel felt a flutter in her chest. "Yes, I'd like that." He smiled, and it transformed his face completely. "I'll pick you up at 7. After he left, Noel stood at the window watching him disappear into the rainy night. The evening had been surreal. Lucian Hart in her apartment, drinking tea from her mismatched mugs. The man from the letters was real, his pain was real, and the connection between them felt more real than ever. The next morning, Margaret found Lucian already at his desk when she arrived at the office at 7 a.m. "You're early," she observed. "How bad is the security breach?" "The team contained it. No patient data was compromised." Lucian looked up from his computer, and Margaret was startled by the change in him. There was an energy, a presence that had been missing for years. "You seem different this morning," she remarked. "Does it have anything to do with where you disappeared to last night in the middle of the crisis?" "I had something important to take care of," he said, a small smile playing at his lips. "And I need your help with something today. I want to send flowers to someone. Can you arrange that?" Margaret raised an eyebrow. In 5 years as his assistant, Lucian had never asked her to send flowers to anyone. "Of course. What kind would you like to send?" "I don't know. Something beautiful but not too formal. Something that feels real." "And who am I sending these mysterious real flowers to?" Lucian hesitated only briefly. "Noel James. She teaches at Brooklyn Heights Academy." Margaret couldn't hide her surprise. "Is this the person you've been exchanging letters with?" "Yes," Lucian admitted, "and I'm taking her to dinner tonight." Lucian Hart, on an actual date, with a real person. Margaret's shock gave way to genuine happiness. "I never thought I'd see the day." "Neither did I," he confessed. "But she's different, Margaret. She sees me, not the CEO, not the billionaire, just me." "Then she's already extraordinary," Margaret said. "I'll arrange the most beautiful flowers she's ever seen." When a delivery man arrived at Brooklyn Heights Academy with a stunning arrangement of wildflowers during third period, Noel's students erupted in excited whispers. "Ms. James has a secret admirer," Zoe exclaimed, wiggling her eyebrows suggestively. Noel felt her cheeks grow warm as she accepted the flowers. The card read simply, "Real flowers for a real connection. Looking forward to tonight. Lucian." Her colleague Vanessa poked her head into the classroom. "Those are gorgeous. Who are they from?" "Just a friend," Noel said, trying to downplay the situation in front of her curious students. "Must be some friend," Vanessa replied with a knowing smile. "You're glowing." For the rest of the day, Noel found it difficult to concentrate on teaching. Her mind kept drifting to Lucian, to their letters, to his unexpected appearance at her door, to the vulnerable conversation they'd shared. It felt both brand new and somehow familiar, like returning to a place she'd only ever visited in dreams. By the time she got home that afternoon, nervous energy had taken over. She tried on and discarded 5 different outfits before settling on a simple burgundy dress that her mother had always said brought out the warmth in her skin. At exactly 7 p.m., there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, Lucian stood there in a charcoal grey suit, looking both polished and slightly uncomfortable. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes taking her in with undisguised appreciation. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, grabbing her coat. "No more dripping on my welcome mat." Lucian smiled, relaxing slightly. "I brought a car this time instead of walking through a rainstorm." Outside, a sleek black car waited at the curb. The driver opened the door for them, and Noel slid into the luxurious interior, suddenly very aware of the vast differences in their daily lives. "Where are we going?" she asked, as the car pulled away from her neighborhood. "There's a small Italian restaurant in the West Village that I thought you might like. It's quiet, private. We can talk without interruptions." He looked at her uncertainly. "Unless you'd prefer something else?" "That sounds perfect," she assured him. "Thank you for the flowers, by the way. They caused quite a stir among my students. I'm sorry if I embarrassed you." "Don't be. It was sweet." She turned to face him more fully. "But can I ask you something? Why me, Lucian? Out of all the people in the world, why did my response to your letter affect you so deeply?" Lucian was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When I wrote that first letter, I was in the darkest place I'd been since Emily died. I wasn't sleeping, wasn't really living, just existing in this cycle of work and isolation. I never meant for anyone to read those words. But then I did, Noel said softly. Then you did, he agreed. And instead of pity or judgment, you offered understanding. You saw the broken pieces and didn't try to fix them or look away from them. You just acknowledged them, recognized them from your own experience. He reached for her hand, tentatively, and she let him take it. Do you know how rare that is? To be seen exactly as you are and not be found wanting? The vulnerability in his voice made Noel's heart ache. I know exactly how rare it is. That's why your letters meant so much to me too. The restaurant was everything Lucian had promised. Intimate, with soft lighting and tables spaced far enough apart for private conversation. The owner greeted him by name, leading them to a secluded corner table. You come here often? Noel asked as they were seated. I have all my business meals here, Lucian admitted. Antonio respects privacy and doesn't treat me differently because of who I am. And who are you exactly? She asked, unfolding her napkin. Beyond the CEO? Beyond the letters? Lucian considered the question. I'm not sure I know anymore. For so long I've been defined by my work, by Emily's death, by my guilt. Those things became my identity. Then maybe it's time to discover who else you might be, Noel suggested. Over pasta and wine they began that discovery. Lucian told her about growing up with Emily, about their parents who had been more interested in social status than their children, how he had always felt responsible for protecting his little sister from their coldness, how he had started coding at 13, creating games for Emily when she was sad. Noel shared stories of her childhood in a warm but struggling household, her mother working 2 jobs to support them after her father left. How poetry had been her escape, her way of making sense of the world. How teaching had become not just a job, but a calling. Your students are lucky to have you, Lucian said. They're amazing kids. Even when they drive me crazy, they remind me why words matter. Noel twirled pasta around her fork. That's actually what attracted me to your mental health apps when I looked up your company. The way you use language to help people articulate what they're feeling. That was inspired by Emily, Lucian said. She struggled to explain what was happening in her mind. I always thought if she'd had better tools, better words. Is that why you subscribed to poetry magazines? Looking for better words? Lucian nodded. Poetry distills complex emotions into something you can hold in your hand. When I read your poems in whispers, they were like that, taking nebulous feelings and giving them shape. The hours passed quickly, and before they knew it, Antonio was apologetically telling them it was closing time. I didn't realize it was so late, Noel said, surprised to see it was nearly midnight. Outside, the night air was cool and clear after yesterday's rain. They walked slowly toward the waiting car, neither quite ready for the evening to end. I have a confession to make, Lucian said suddenly. That day at the park wasn't the first time I saw you in person. Noel stopped walking. What do you mean? After I discovered who you were from your poem, I went to your school. I watched you with your students from across the street. He looked ashamed. I know that sounds stalkerish and creepy. I just wanted to see you, to know you were real. Instead of being angry, Noel felt a strange flutter in her chest. What did you see? You were wearing a yellow scarf. You were laughing with some students on the steps. You looked so alive, so present, so different from how I've been living. Is that why you couldn't approach me at the park? Because the real me was too different from the person in the letters? No, Lucian said, taking her hands in his. Because you were exactly who I imagined, and it terrified me. The connection we had in those letters. What if it couldn't survive in the real world? What if I disappointed you? What if the CEO, the billionaire, the broken man was too much baggage for anyone to want? Noel squeezed his hands. Those letters were real, Lucian. The connection was real, but we'll never know what else might be real unless we take the risk. Under the streetlight, with the sounds of the city around them, Lucian slowly leaned forward. May I? He whispered. Noel nodded, and his lips met hers in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened into something more urgent, more hungry. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. I should get you home, Lucian said, his voice rough. The ride back to Brooklyn was charged with unspoken desire. They sat close, fingers intertwined, the air between them electric with possibility. When they reached her apartment, Lucian walked her to her door. Thank you for tonight, he said. For giving me a chance after the park. Thank you for finding the courage to knock on my door, she replied. He kissed her again, more intensely this time, his hands tangling in her hair, as he pressed her gently against the door. Noel felt herself melting into him, her body responding to his touch in ways she hadn't experienced in years. When they separated, both knew they were standing at another threshold, one that had nothing to do with apartments or doors. "Would you like to come in?" Noel asked, her heart pounding. Lucian's eyes darkened with desire. "More than anything, but not tonight." She couldn't hide her surprise. "Oh, not because I don't want to," he quickly clarified, brushing his thumb across her cheek, "but because it matters too much to rush. I want to do this right, Noel. I want to know all of you, not just parts." The tenderness in his voice made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. "Okay," she whispered. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked. "I have papers to grade." "I could help," he offered. "I'm very good at spotting split infinitives." Noel laughed. "Somehow I doubt grading sophomore poetry analysis is how Lucian Hart usually spends his Saturday nights." "I'd like it to be," he said seriously. "I'd like to be part of your normal life, not just special occasions." The simple honesty of his words touched her deeply. "Come over at 6. I'll order takeout." One more kiss, gentle and full of promise, and then he was gone. Noel leaned against her closed door, her fingers touching her lips where the warmth of his kiss still lingered. Whatever was happening between them felt both exhilarating and terrifying, like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that jumping might mean flying or falling. Over the next few weeks, Lucian and Noel settled into a rhythm that surprised them both with its ease. 3 or 4 nights a week, he would come to her apartment after work. Sometimes they cooked together, sometimes they ordered in. Always they talked, continuing the deep, honest conversations from their letters, but now with the added dimension of physical presence. Lucian helped her grade papers, genuinely interested in her students' work. Noel listened as he talked through challenges at Mindwell, offering perspectives he hadn't considered. On weekends, they explored Brooklyn and Manhattan together, finding small bookstores and coffee shops where they could sit for hours. For Noel, watching Lucian slowly emerge from his shell was like witnessing a flower bloom in time-lapse. Each day, he seemed more present, more engaged with the world around him. He smiled more, laughed more. The haunted look in his eyes began to fade. For Lucian, being with Noel was like learning to breathe again after years of holding his breath. Her apartment became a sanctuary, a place where he could simply be himself, without the weight of his company or his past pressing down on him. But as their connection deepened, the differences in their lives became more apparent too. Lucian's phone was constantly buzzing with business emergencies. Photographers occasionally spotted them together, leading to speculation in business publications about the Reclusive CEO's new romance. "I'm sorry about this," Lucian said one night, showing Noel a business tabloid with a blurry photo of them walking hand in hand through Central Park. The headline read, "Mindwell's billionaire bachelor off the market." "It's okay," she assured him. "I knew who you were when this started." But privately, Noel worried. Her life was so simple compared to his. Teaching, grading papers, writing poetry in her spare time. Would he eventually grow bored with her ordinary existence? Would the novelty of normalcy wear off? These doubts lingered in the back of her mind, even as their relationship blossomed. Yet every time Lucian looked at her with those intense blue eyes, every time he held her hand while they walked through the city, every time he kissed her goodbye at her door, the doubts receded a little more, until the night when everything changed. It was a Thursday evening, nearly 2 months after their first dinner date. Lucian had texted earlier to say he was running late. A board meeting had gone longer than expected. When he finally arrived at her apartment, he looked exhausted. "Rough day?" Noel asked, taking his coat. "The worst," he admitted, collapsing onto her couch. "The board is pushing back on the new suicide prevention initiative. They think it's too expensive, too controversial. They don't understand why it matters so much." "Did you tell them about Emily?" she asked gently, sitting beside him. "No," Lucian said. "I've never told anyone at the company about her, about what really happened." "Maybe it's time," Noel suggested. "Not everything, not all the personal details, but enough for them to understand why this initiative matters to you." Lucian looked at her with wonder. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "See so clearly what I need to do when I've been staring at the problem for months." She smiled. "Sometimes it's easier to see solutions when you're not in the middle of the storm." Lucian pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'm grateful for it every day." They stayed like that for a long moment, the comfort of their embrace washing away the stress of the day. When Lucian finally pulled back, His expression had changed. There was a new intensity in his eyes, a certainty that made Noel's heart race. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I've loved you since that first letter you sent, but I know for sure that I love you now. Not just your words on paper, but everything about you. The way you see the world, the way you see me, the way you've helped me see myself again." Noel felt tears spring to her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "So much that it scares me sometimes." "Why does it scare you?" he asked, brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "Because I've never felt this way before. Because it's happened so fast. Because you're you and I'm me, and our worlds are so different." "Do you think that matters to me?" Lucian asked. "Your world, this apartment, your students, your simple, beautiful life. It's saved me, Noel. You've saved me." That night, they made love for the first time. What began as tender exploration quickly transformed into passionate urgency, months of desire finally finding expression. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her bed, the city lights casting soft patterns across the ceiling. "Stay," Noel murmured, as sleep began to claim her. "Don't go home tonight." "I'm not going anywhere," Lucian promised, pulling her closer. "Not ever again." As they drifted off to sleep, neither could have predicted the storm that was gathering on the horizon, a storm that would test the foundations of the love they had built, letter by letter, touch by touch, truth by truth. Morning sunlight streamed through Noel's bedroom window, warming her face and gently pulling her from sleep. She reached across the bed, expecting to find Lucian beside her, but her hand met only cold sheets. She opened her eyes, momentarily disoriented, then heard sounds coming from her small kitchen. Wrapping herself in her robe, Noel padded down the hallway to find Lucian standing at her stove, his back to her, wearing only his pants from the night before. He was humming softly as he flipped pancakes in her old cast-iron skillet. "Good morning," she said, leaning against the doorframe. Lucian turned, his face lighting up at the sight of her. "I was going to surprise you with breakfast in bed." "Consider me surprised," she replied, walking over to wrap her arms around his waist from behind. "I didn't know billionaire CEOs could cook." "Just pancakes," he admitted, "and only because Emily taught me. She used to make them every Sunday morning." Noel rested her cheek against his back, feeling the warmth of his skin through the thin fabric of her robe. These moments when he mentioned Emily without pain shadowing his face felt like small victories. "I have a busy day ahead," Lucian said, turning off the stove and facing her. "Board meetings all morning. Then I'm launching the new suicide prevention initiative this afternoon, regardless of what the board thinks." "Are you going to tell them about Emily?" she asked. He nodded. "Just enough for them to understand why this matters so much to me. You were right. It's time." After breakfast, Noel watched from the window as Lucian climbed into the black car, waiting at the curb. How quickly the extraordinary had become ordinary. Waking up with Lucian Hart in her bed, sharing breakfast in her tiny kitchen, watching him leave for work in a car that probably cost more than her annual salary. Yet despite the growing normalcy of their relationship, the differences in their lives remained stark. She was due at school in an hour to teach 4 classes of teenagers about the power of words. He was off to run a billion-dollar company and fight with his board of directors. Sometimes those differences felt like a chasm between them. Other times, like this morning, they felt meaningless compared to the connection they shared. Lucian straightened his tie as the elevator ascended to the top floor of Mindwell Tower. Margaret was waiting when the doors opened, holding a tablet and wearing a concerned expression. "The board is already assembled in the conference room," she said, falling into step beside him. "And they don't look happy." "They're going to be even less happy in about 10 minutes, Lucian replied, a new determination in his voice. Inside the conference room, 8 people in expensive suits sat around a gleaming table. Alexander Jensen, the chairman of the board, stood when Lucian entered. "Lucian, before we begin, the board has some concerns about the direction of—" "I'm launching the suicide prevention initiative today," Lucian interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "The press release goes out at noon." A murmur of surprise rippled around the table. "That's not what we agreed," Alexander protested. "We decided to table that discussion until next quarter." "No, you decided. I listened. Now you're going to listen to me." Lucian took a deep breath. 5 years ago, my younger sister Emily took her own life. The room fell completely silent. She was 17 years old. She was struggling with depression, but I was too busy building this company to see the signs. The night she died, she called me, and I ignored her call. Lucian's voice didn't waver, but his hands gripped the edge of the table. I founded Mindwell to help people understand and manage their mental health, but our current apps don't do enough for those in crisis. The people who need help most urgently. He looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. This initiative will save lives. It will cost $17 million to implement fully. That's exactly $1 million for each year of Emily's life. I'm prepared to fund it personally if the company won't, but I would rather we do this together, as a statement about what Mindwell truly stands for. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Caroline Bennett, the oldest member of the board, cleared her throat. I think I speak for all of us when I say we had no idea about your sister, Lucian. I'm deeply sorry for your loss. She glanced around the table, receiving nods of agreement. I move that we approve the full funding for the Suicide Prevention Initiative, effective immediately. Seconded, said another board member. Alexander looked stunned but quickly regained his composure. All in favor? 8 hands went up without hesitation. Motion passed unanimously, Alexander declared. And Lucian, I owe you an apology for pushing back on this. Had I known... It's not something I talk about, Lucian said. But I'm learning that some stories need to be shared, even when it's difficult. He thought of Noel, of how she had encouraged him to open up. Thank you all for your support. As the meeting continued, Lucian felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. For years he had carried the burden of Emily's death alone, letting it drive him but never speaking of it. Sharing even this small part of his story had been liberating in a way he hadn't expected. When the meeting ended, Margaret was waiting outside with a small smile. That went better than expected. It did, Lucian agreed. We have a lot of work to do for this afternoon's launch. But first, I need you to do something for me. Name it. Find the best jewelry store in the city. I need to look at rings. Margaret's eyes widened. Rings? As in engagement rings, Lucian confirmed, a nervous excitement bubbling up inside him. It's time, Margaret. At Brooklyn Heights Academy, Noel was in the middle of a lesson on Emily Dickinson when her classroom door opened. The school secretary peered in, looking apologetic. Sorry to interrupt, Ms. James, but you have a delivery. 2 delivery men entered, carrying an enormous arrangement of wildflowers, even larger than the one Lucian had sent before. The students erupted in excited whispers and giggles. Ms. James has a boyfriend, Zoe sang out, causing the class to laugh. Noel felt her cheeks grow warm as she accepted the flowers. Thank you. Class, please continue reading the poem silently while I deal with this. She stepped into the hallway with the massive arrangement, searching for the card. When she found it, her heart skipped a beat. These flowers still can't compete with your beauty. Thank you for helping me find my voice today. Dinner at my place tonight? Send your answer with the driver. All my love, L. Noel quickly scribbled yes on the card and handed it back to the waiting delivery man. She had never been to Lucien's home before. In the 2 months they'd been dating, they had always met at restaurants or spent time at her apartment. The prospect of seeing where he lived, that private space he had kept hidden from the world, felt significant. When she returned to her classroom, her students were buzzing with curiosity. Are those from your billionaire boyfriend? Asked Jason, one of her more outspoken students. Noel froze. What did you say? Jason held up his phone, showing a gossip website with a photo of her and Lucien walking together in the park. The headline read, Mindwell CEO's mystery woman identified. Brooklyn teacher captures billionaire's heart. Is it true, Ms. James? Zoe asked eagerly. Are you dating Lucian Hart? Noel felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. That's my personal life and not appropriate for classroom discussion. Now back to Emily Dickinson. But the damage was done. By lunchtime, the entire school was talking about Noel's relationship with Lucien. Teachers gave her knowing looks in the hallway. The principal stopped by her classroom to casually mention that the school could always use more funding for the arts. Just what I needed, Noel muttered to herself as she gathered her things at the end of the day. My private life splashed all over the internet. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Have you seen the article about you and your billionaire boyfriend? Call me ASAP, followed by one from her mother. Honey, why am I finding out about your new man from the internet? Call me. And then, most disturbingly, one from a number she didn't recognize. Did you really think he'd stay with someone like you? Enjoy it while it lasts, honey. Noelle's hands trembled as she deleted the last message. This was the part of Lucien's world she had been dreading. The public scrutiny, the judgment, the cruel comments from strangers. By the time she arrived at the address Lucien had given her, a sleek high-rise overlooking Central Park, her stomach was in knots. The doorman greeted her by name, making her wonder if her photo had been circulated to the building staff. Mr. Hart is expecting you, Ms. James. penthouse floor. The private elevator whisked her upward, its silent efficiency a stark contrast to the creaky stairs of her Brooklyn walk-up. When the doors opened, she stepped directly into Lucian's apartment and gasped. The penthouse was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Central Park and the city beyond. The space was elegantly furnished in shades of grey and blue, but it felt more like a museum than a home, beautiful but untouched, without the lived-in comfort of her own small apartment. "Noel?" Lucian's voice called from somewhere inside. She followed the sound to find him in a state-of-the-art kitchen, stirring something that smelled delicious on the stove. "You're cooking?" she asked, surprised. He looked up with a smile that quickly faded when he saw her expression. "What's wrong? Have you seen the internet today?" Noel asked, setting her bag down on the counter. Lucian's face fell. "The photos of us. I saw them this morning. I'm so sorry, Noel. I should have warned you this might happen. It's not just photos anymore. They found out who I am, where I teach." She showed him her phone, scrolling through the various gossip sites that had picked up the story. "My students saw it, my colleagues. Even my mother called." "I'm sorry," he said again, turning off the stove and moving to take her in his arms. "This is my fault. I should have been more careful." "It's not about being careful," Noel said, pulling back slightly. "It's about the reality of your life. You're a public figure, Lucian. People are interested in who you date. I didn't think it would happen so soon, or feel so invasive." "We'll get through this," he assured her. "The media will lose interest eventually. They always do." But Noel wasn't so sure. Looking around at his pristine penthouse, at the evidence of wealth and privilege that surrounded him, the differences in their worlds had never felt more pronounced. "I got a text message today," she said quietly, "from someone I don't know. They said you wouldn't stay with someone like me, that I should enjoy it while it lasts." Lucian's face darkened with anger. "Who sent that? Give me the number." "It doesn't matter who sent it," Noel said. "What matters is that there are people out there who think that way, who look at you, then look at me and see a mismatch." "Those people don't know us," Lucian insisted. "They don't understand what we have." "Maybe not," she agreed. "But it made me think about the reality of us. You live here in this perfect penthouse with this spectacular view. I live in a one-bedroom walk-up in Brooklyn with noisy neighbors and radiators that clank all night in the winter. And I've been happier in your noisy apartment than I've ever been in this perfect penthouse," Lucian said fiercely. "This place, it's never felt like home. It's just where I sleep when I'm not working. Your apartment is warm and full of life, like you." The sincerity in his voice melted some of her anxiety. "I'm sorry. It's been a long day. And seeing this place, it just hammered home how different our lives are. Not where it counts," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Not in the ways that matter." He led her to the dining room where he had set a small table by the window with candles and flowers. "I made pasta, or tried to. It may not be edible." Noel laughed despite herself. "I'm sure it's fine." Over dinner, Lucian told her about the board meeting, about sharing Emily's story and securing approval for the suicide prevention initiative. "You were right," he said, reaching for her hand across the table. It was time to talk about her. Time to use her story to help others. "I'm proud of you," Noel said, squeezing his hand. "That took real courage." "I've been thinking a lot about courage lately," Lucian said, a strange nervousness entering his voice. "About taking risks, about not letting fear dictate my life anymore." He stood suddenly. "There's something I want to show you." Curious, Noel followed him through the apartment to a door she hadn't noticed before. When Lucian opened it, she gasped. Inside was a room entirely different from the rest of the sterile penthouse. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with poetry collections and literary magazines. A comfortable reading chair sat in one corner near a window, and most surprisingly, framed on the wall was her poem, the one she had sent him in their letters, beautifully mounted and prominently displayed. "This is my sanctuary," Lucian explained. "The one room that's truly mine, not decorated by some designer. I've spent most of my time here, reading your poems and others, trying to make sense of my life." Noel walked slowly around the room, running her fingers along the book spines. "You have first editions," she murmured, recognizing some rare poetry collections. "I want to show you something else," Lucian said, opening a drawer in the desk by the window. He pulled out a bundle of blue envelopes, tied with a simple ribbon. "I've kept every letter you wrote me." Noel's heart swelled. "I've kept yours too. These letters," he said, holding them carefully. "They changed everything for me. You changed everything." He set the letters down and took both her hands in his. "Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions, building a company to atone for a guilt I couldn't escape. But you showed me there could be more, that I could feel again, that I could be seen and known and still be loved. To Noel's shock, Lucian dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. I know it's fast, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I know we come from different worlds, but I also know that I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You make me want to be better, braver, more present in my own life. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Noel James, will you marry me? Noel felt the room spin around her. When Lucian opened the box, a stunning emerald-cut diamond ring glittered inside, catching the light from the window. Lucian, she whispered, her voice failing her. His eyes searched hers, vulnerability plain on his face. Is it too soon? I know it's only been 2 months, but it's not that, she interrupted, her thoughts racing. Everything is happening so fast. The media attention, now this. I need a moment to breathe. Lucian slowly rose to his feet, carefully closing the ring box. Take all the time you need. The ring isn't going anywhere. Neither am I. Noel's eyes filled with tears. I love you. I do. But my whole life has changed in the span of 2 months. I went from being a regular teacher to having gossip sites tracking my movements. I went from writing letters to a stranger to standing in his penthouse being proposed to. It's overwhelming. I understand, Lucian said, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. I shouldn't have rushed this. It's not a no, Noel assured him, taking his face in her hands. It's a not yet. I need time to adjust to all of this, to being part of your world, to the public scrutiny, to the idea that this is really happening. Lucian nodded, pressing a kiss to her palm. I can wait. You're worth waiting for. That night, they made love with a new intensity, as if they were both trying to prove something through touch that words couldn't adequately express. Afterward, as Noel lay in Lucian's arms in his massive bed, she wondered if she had made a mistake. Maybe she should have said yes immediately. Maybe her hesitation would make him doubt her love. What are you thinking? Lucian asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. That I'm afraid you'll think I don't love you enough because I didn't say yes right away, she admitted. I would never think that, he assured her. You're being sensible. One of us should be. But as they drifted off to sleep, Noel couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them, a subtle change in the atmosphere, like the first hint of an approaching storm. The storm arrived sooner than either of them expected. The next morning, Lucien woke to his phone buzzing incessantly. Careful not to disturb the still sleeping Noel, he slipped out of bed and into the living room to answer it. What is it, Margaret? He asked, his voice still rough with sleep. Turn on your TV, his assistant replied, sounding unusually tense. Channel 8, now. Lucien found the remote and switched on the television, keeping the volume low. A blonde reporter stood outside Brooklyn Heights Academy, speaking into a microphone. Sources close to Mindwell Technologies confirm that CEO Lucien Hart has been dating Brooklyn poetry teacher Noel James for approximately 2 months, the reporter was saying. But what viewers may find most interesting is James's connection to Marcus Delacroix, the former CFO of rival company MindSync, who was ousted 3 years ago amid embezzlement allegations. Lucian felt his blood run cold. According to our sources, James and Delacroix were in a serious relationship at the time of the scandal, which raises questions about whether Hart's interest in James might be more strategic than romantic. Could this be corporate espionage disguised as a love affair? Mindwell and MindSync have been bitter rivals for years, with Hart's company recently pulling ahead in market share. Turn it off, came Noel's voice from behind him. Lucien spun around to find her standing in the doorway, her face pale, her body rigid with tension. Noel, just turn it off, please, she repeated. Lucien switched off the TV, his mind racing. Is it true? Was Marcus Delacroix from MindSync your ex? Yes, Noel said, her voice steady despite the hurt in her eyes. But I had no idea he was embezzling money. I didn't even know the details of his job. He never talked about work with me. I believe you, Lucien said immediately. Of course I believe you. Do you? She asked, moving past him to look out the window. Because you just asked if it was true. I meant, was he your ex? Not was it true about the corporate espionage, Lucien clarified. That's ridiculous. I know you would never, but you still had to ask, Noel cut in, and now everyone will be asking. My students, their parents, my colleagues. Everyone will wonder if I'm using you to get information for your competitor. We'll issue a statement, Lucian said, reaching for his phone. "We'll make it clear that we shouldn't have to issue a statement about our relationship," Noel exclaimed, her calm facade finally cracking. "Don't you see how insane this is? Yesterday my students found out I'm dating you. Today there are reporters outside my school suggesting I'm a corporate spy. What will it be tomorrow?" Lucian moved toward her, but she held up a hand to stop him. "I need some space. I need to think." "Noel, please," he said, his voice breaking. "Don't let them do this to us. Don't let them take what we have." "This isn't about them," she said quietly. "It's about us. About whether what we have is strong enough to withstand this kind of pressure. I thought it was, but now I'm not so sure." "What are you saying?" Lucian asked, fear creeping into his voice. Noel looked at him, her eyes filled with a sadness that made his chest ache. "I'm saying I need time, Lucian. Time to figure out if I can live in this fishbowl. If what we have is worth having my past relationships dissected on morning television." "It is," he insisted. "What we have is worth everything." She shook her head. "You're used to this world. I'm not. And I'm not sure I want to get used to it." Noel gathered her things quickly, refusing Lucien's offer to drive her home. "I'll take a cab. I need to be alone right now." At the elevator, she turned back to him. "I do love you, Lucien. That's not in question. What I'm questioning is whether love is enough." And then she was gone, leaving Lucian standing in his perfect empty penthouse, feeling more alone than he had in months. The next week passed in a blur of pain for both of them. Noel took sick days from school to avoid the reporters who continued to gather outside. Lucien threw himself into work, staying at the office until midnight every night. They texted occasionally, brief messages that did little to bridge the growing gap between them. "Are you okay?" Lucian would ask. "I'm managing." "You?" Noel would reply. "Missing you, thinking of you, loving you." He would write, "I know, me too," she would answer. But neither mentioned meeting, neither suggested a path forward. It was as if they were both frozen in place, afraid to make a move in any direction. One night, after a particularly grueling day of meetings, Lucien found himself driving toward Brooklyn without conscious decision. He parked outside Noel's building, staring up at her window, where a light glowed softly. He imagined her inside, perhaps grading papers or reading poetry, and the ache to be with her was almost physical. His phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "CNN wants to interview you about the Suicide Prevention Initiative tomorrow. Also, the board is asking questions about Noel and the mind-sync connection. What should I tell them?" Lucien stared at the message, a bitter taste filling his mouth. This was his reality now, every personal relationship scrutinized for its business implications, every private moment potentially fodder for public consumption. And now, he was bringing Noel into that reality, exposing her to the same harsh spotlight that had been following him for years. Was that fair to her? Was his love worth the price she was being asked to pay? With a heavy heart, Lucien started the car and drove away without going upstairs. For the first time, he began to wonder if loving Noel meant letting her go. In her apartment, Noel sat by the window watching the street below. She had seen Lucian's car arrive, had felt her heart leap at the sight of it. Then, inexplicably, she had watched him drive away without coming up. The pain of that moment, of being so close yet still separate, crystallized something in her mind. She couldn't continue in this limbo. She had to decide. Was she strong enough to face the challenges of being with Lucien, or would she retreat to the safety of her former life? She reached for the bundle of letters on her coffee table, all the words they had exchanged before they knew each other's names, before the complications of their real lives had intruded. The raw honesty in those pages had been the foundation of their connection. Perhaps it could be their way back to each other now. Noel took out a sheet of paper and began to write. "Dear Lucien, I saw you outside tonight. I watched you sit in your car and then drive away. I imagined you looking up at my window, wondering if you should come up, deciding against it. The space between your car and my door felt like miles, even though it was only a few hundred feet. These past days without you have been hollow. I've been trying to decide if I'm brave enough for the life that comes with loving you, the public scrutiny, the loss of privacy, the constant speculation about my motives. It's a high price to pay. But tonight, watching you drive away, I realized something. The price of not being with you is even higher. Living without your smile, your touch, your understanding, that would be the greater loss. I don't know how we navigate this complicated world we've found ourselves in. I don't know how to be the partner of a public figure. I don't know how to ignore the cruel things people will say about us, but I do know that I want to figure it out with you, together. You asked me a question the other night that I couldn't answer. I think I'm ready to answer it now. All my love, Noel." She sealed the letter in an envelope and wrote his name on the front. Tomorrow, she would deliver it herself. Tomorrow, they would find their way back to each other. What Noel didn't know was that at that very moment, Lucian was making a decision of his own, one that would test their love in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Morning brought a knock at Noel's door. Heart racing, she hurried to answer it, expecting to find Lucian. Instead, a stern-faced woman in a sharp suit stood in the hallway. "Ms. James, I'm Catherine Winters, head of PR for Mindwell Technologies." She handed Noel a business card. "May I come in? There's something important we need to discuss." Confused and wary, Noel stepped back to allow the woman inside. "Is Lucian okay? Has something happened?" "Mr. Hart is fine," Catherine assured her, looking around the apartment with barely concealed disdain. "He asked me to speak with you about a situation that's developed." "What situation?" Noel asked, her unease growing. Catherine took a seat on the couch without being invited. "The board of directors has expressed serious concerns about your relationship with Mr. Hart, given your prior connection to Marcus Delacroix and MindSync. I told Lucian I had no idea about Marcus's work or the embezzlement," Noel protested. "Nevertheless, the appearance of impropriety is problematic for a company of Mindwell's standing." Catherine opened her briefcase and removed a document. "Mr. Hart has authorized me to offer you a settlement in exchange for a confidentiality agreement and a clean break." She slid the document across the coffee table. Noel stared at it in disbelief. "A settlement? You mean money to go away?" $1 million to be exact, Catherine said clinically. "A very generous offer considering the circumstances. All we ask is that you sign this agreement stating you will not discuss your relationship with Mr. Hart or any aspects of Mindwell Technologies with the press or on social media." Noel felt as if the floor were tilting beneath her feet. "Lucian sent you here to pay me off?" "Mr. Hart felt this would be the cleanest solution for all involved," Catherine replied. "The media attention has been disruptive to both your life and to company operations. This way, you can start fresh, perhaps relocate to a new city, take some time off from teaching." "Get out," Noel said, her voice deadly quiet. "Excuse me? Get out of my apartment now." Noel stood trembling with rage and hurt. "And you can tell Lucian that if he wants to end things, he can face me himself, not send some corporate fixer with a checkbook." Catherine gathered her documents with an expression of mild annoyance. "I suggest you think about this offer carefully, Ms. James. It's unlikely to be repeated." After Catherine left, Noel sank to the floor, the letter she had written to Lucian clutched in her hand. How could she have been so wrong about him? How could the man who had written those beautiful letters, who had held her through the night, who had looked at her with such love, now be trying to pay her to disappear from his life? The pain was so intense, it felt physical. A crushing weight on her chest that made it difficult to breathe. This, she realized, was what true heartbreak felt like. Not the disappointment she had felt when Marcus left, but this shattering, this complete undoing of everything she had come to believe about love and trust. With shaking hands, she tore up the letter she had written. Then she reached for her phone. Lucian was in the middle of a conference call when Margaret burst into his office, looking uncharacteristically alarmed. "You need to take this call," she said, holding out his private line. "Now." Something in her tone made him quickly excuse himself from the meeting. "What is it?" "It's Noel," Margaret said, "and she's furious." Lucian's heart sank as he took the phone. "Noel, what's wrong?" "How dare you?" came her voice, cold and hard in a way he had never heard before. "How dare you send that woman to my home to offer me money like I'm some problem to be solved?" "What?" Lucian felt as if he'd been punched. "What woman? What money?" "Catherine Winters, your head of PR. She just left my apartment after offering me $1 million to sign a confidentiality agreement and disappear from your life." Lucian gripped the edge of his desk, a sick feeling spreading through his stomach. "Noel, I swear to you I didn't send her. I don't know anything about this." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You expect me to believe that your head of PR came to my apartment with company documents, offering me company money without your knowledge or approval?" "Yes, because it's the truth," Lucian insisted. "I would never—" "Save it," Noel cut him off. "I thought I knew you, Lucian. I thought what we had was real, but if you can reduce it to a business transaction, then it clearly meant something very different to you than it did to me. Please," he begged, panic rising in his throat. "Let me come over. Let me explain in person." "There's nothing to explain," she replied, her voice breaking. "It's over. Don't call me again. Don't come to my home. Just leave me alone." The line went dead. Lucian stared at the phone in horror, then slammed it down and rounded on Margaret. "Find Catherine Winters and get her in my office in 5 minutes," he growled. "And call Alexander Jensen. Tell him I need to see him immediately." Margaret nodded, already dialing. "What's happening, Lucian?" "I think I'm being sabotaged," he said grimly, "and I'm about to find out why." Within 10 minutes, Catherine Winters stood before his desk, looking uncomfortable but not particularly remorseful. Alexander Jensen had also arrived, his expression carefully neutral. "Did you go to Noel James's apartment this morning and offer her money to end our relationship?" Lucian demanded of Catherine. "Yes," she admitted without hesitation. "It was the proper PR strategy given the circumstances. Under whose authority?" Catherine glanced at Alexander before answering. "The board felt—" "The board?" Lucian interrupted, turning his furious gaze to Alexander. "The board has no authority over my personal life." Alexander stepped forward. "When your personal life threatens the stability of this company, the board has every right to intervene. Your relationship with a woman connected to our main competitor— Noel has no connection to MindSync beyond dating Marcus years ago," Lucian shouted. "And even if she did, that's my concern, not yours." "The market doesn't see it that way," Alexander replied calmly. "Our stock has dropped 12% since the news broke. Investors are nervous. The board is nervous." "So you went behind my back to try to buy off the woman I love?" Lucien's voice was dangerously quiet now. "It was a business decision," Alexander said, unfazed. "One that you were too emotionally involved to make objectively." Lucien looked between them, sudden clarity dawning. "This isn't about protecting the company. This is about controlling me. You've never liked that I keep the board at arm's length, that I make decisions without consulting you, so you found a way to hurt me where I'm most vulnerable." "That's absurd," Alexander scoffed, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes that told Lucian he was right. "Catherine, you're fired," Lucian said flatly. "Clear out your office by the end of the day." "You can't fire me," she protested. "I report to the board, not to you." "Actually, the PR department reports directly to the CEO," Lucien corrected her. "Check your contract." He turned to Alexander. "As for you, I'll be calling an emergency board meeting this afternoon. I suggest you prepare to explain why you authorized a company employee to interfere in my personal life without my knowledge or consent." Alexander's confident facade cracked slightly. The other board members agreed. "We'll see about that," Lucien cut him off. "Now get out of my office, both of you." After they left, Lucien collapsed into his chair, his mind racing. He had to fix this, had to make Noel understand that he hadn't betrayed her, that he would never reduce what they had to a business transaction. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. "Cancel all my meetings," he told Margaret. "I'm going to Brooklyn." "Lucien, wait," Margaret called after him. "There's something else you should know." He paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Alexander has been meeting privately with investors," she said. "I overheard him on the phone yesterday. He was saying that your emotional instability was putting the company at risk, that the board might need to take more direct control." Lucien absorbed this information with grim understanding. "He's trying to push me out." "I think so," Margaret agreed. "And he's using your relationship with Noel as leverage." "Well, he picked the wrong fight," Lucien said, "because I'm not losing her, not like this, not over corporate politics." When Lucien arrived at Noel's building, Mrs. Rodriguez was watering her plants in the hallway. "She's not there," the older woman informed him before he could even knock. "Left about an hour ago with a suitcase. Said she was going to stay with her mother for a while." Lucien felt a wave of desperation wash over him. "Did she say when she'd be back?" Mrs. Rodriguez shook her head. She looked pretty upset, had been crying. "What did you do to that sweet girl?" "I didn't," Lucien began, then stopped. It didn't matter what he had or hadn't done. What mattered was finding Noel. He tried calling her, but the call went straight to voicemail. He sent text after text, each more urgent than the last. "Noel, please. I didn't send Catherine. This was Alexander's doing, not mine. I would never try to pay you off. What we have is priceless to me. Tell me where you are. Let me explain in person. I love you. Please don't let them do this to us." But there was no response. Finally, he drove to the school, hoping to catch her there, but the secretary informed him that Ms. James had called in sick again. Desperate, Lucien remembered that Noel had mentioned her mother lived in Queens. He didn't have the address, but he did have resources. One call to his private investigator, and 30 minutes later, he was driving to a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. He parked across the street, his heart pounding as he approached the door. When it opened, a woman in her 60s with Noel's same warm eyes regarded him with open hostility. "Mrs. James?" he asked. "I'm Lucian Hart. I need to speak with Noel." "I know who you are," she replied coolly, "and my daughter doesn't want to speak to you." "Please," Lucian said, his voice breaking. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. I didn't send that woman to her apartment. I would never offer her money to leave me." Mrs. James studied him for a long moment. "You hurt her badly, Mr. Hart. She trusted you." "I know," he admitted, his shoulders slumping, "and I would do anything to make it right. I love her, Mrs. James, more than I've ever loved anyone." Something in his expression must have convinced her, because her stance softened slightly. "Wait here." She closed the door, leaving Lucian on the porch, hope and fear battling within him. A minute later, the door opened again, but it was Mrs. James who reappeared. "She doesn't want to see you," she said, her voice gentler now. "But she did ask me to give you this." She handed him a small envelope with his name written on it in Noel's handwriting. Then she closed the door again, more firmly this time. Lucien returned to his car before opening the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Lucien, I believe you when you say you didn't send Catherine, but in a way that makes this even clearer. Your world, the board, the investors, the media, they will never accept me. They will always see me as a liability, a weakness to exploit. And they'll use me to hurt you just as they did today. I love you too much to be the instrument of your destruction. I love you too much to let our relationship undermine everything you've built. I love you too much to watch you choose between me and your company. So I'm making the choice for both of us. I'm stepping away. Please don't try to find me again. Please understand that this is the last letter I can write to you. I will always cherish what we had, what we found in those accidental letters. Some love stories aren't meant to last forever. Some are just chapters in our lives, beautiful, transformative chapters that change us forever, even when they end. Be well, be happy, be the man I know you can be. With all my love, one last time." Noel Lucien read the letter twice, then pressed it to his chest as a sob escaped him. She was letting him go. Out of love, out of a misguided sense of protection, she was walking away, and he was supposed to let her, to accept this sacrifice, to return to his empty penthouse and his lonely life, because the world had convinced her they couldn't be together. No, not this time. He wasn't hiding anymore. He wasn't letting fear win. Not his, not hers, not anyone's. With sudden clarity, Lucien knew exactly what he had to do. The emergency board meeting was tense from the moment it began. All 8 board members sat around the conference table, with Alexander at one end and Lucian at the other. The atmosphere crackled with unspoken conflict. "I've called this meeting," Lucian began, his voice steady, "because earlier today, without my knowledge or consent, a Mindwell employee approached my girlfriend and offered her money to end our relationship and sign a confidentiality agreement." Murmurs of surprise rippled around the table. Several board members looked genuinely shocked. "I was told this action was authorized by the board," Lucian continued, his gaze fixed on Alexander. "Is that true?" Alexander cleared his throat. "The board discussed concerns about your relationship with Ms. James, given her connection to MindSync. We agreed that some action might be necessary to protect the company, but we never authorized paying her off," Caroline Bennett interrupted, looking horrified. "We discussed having PR prepare a statement addressing the rumors, nothing more." Other board members nodded in agreement. "So," Lucien said, still looking at Alexander, "you lied to Catherine Winters. You told her the board had authorized an action they knew nothing about." Alexander's face flushed with anger. "I was acting in the best interests of the company. Your judgment has been compromised by this relationship. Our stock is down, investors are nervous, and you're too blinded by emotion to see the damage you're causing. Is that so?" Lucien reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder, sliding copies of a document to each board member. "These are the quarterly results we'll be announcing next week. As you can see, our revenue is up 23% year over year. User engagement with our apps has increased by 35%, and the suicide prevention initiative that I pushed through, against your objections, Alexander, has generated more positive press than any product launch in our history." The board members studied the documents with evident surprise. "The stock dip you're so concerned about is temporary," Lucien continued. "It's a reaction to tabloid gossip, not to company performance. And if you think my personal life is affecting my professional judgment, These numbers tell a different story. He stood, placing his hands on the table and leaning forward. The truth is, I'm a better CEO now than I've ever been, because for the first time since my sister died, I'm fully alive again. I'm engaged with the world. I'm thinking beyond the next quarter, beyond the next product cycle. I'm thinking about the kind of company we could be, the kind of impact we could have. Lucian straightened, his gaze sweeping the table. And that's thanks to Noel, to her intelligence, her compassion, her perspective, to the way she challenges me to be better, to do better. This is all very touching, Alexander said sarcastically, but I'm not finished, Lucian cut him off. There's something else the board should know. While Alexander has been busy meddling in my personal life, he's also been meeting privately with investors, suggesting that I'm emotionally unstable and that the board should take more direct control of the company. Several board members turned to look at Alexander with surprise and suspicion. That's a serious accusation, said David Chen, one of the longest-serving board members. I have the phone records to prove it, Lucian replied, and emails. Margaret has been quite thorough in her documentation. Alexander's face had gone pale. This is absurd. You can't possibly... I move that we vote on removing Alexander Jensen as chairman of the board, effective immediately, Caroline Bennett interrupted, her voice firm. Seconded, said another board member without hesitation. Alexander looked around the table in disbelief. After everything I've done for this company, you're taking his side. This isn't about sides, David Chen said. It's about integrity. You acted without board approval and apparently conspired against our CEO. That's unacceptable. The vote was quick and decisive, 7-1 in favor of removing Alexander as chairman, with Alexander himself casting the only dissenting vote. Caroline, as the senior member, would you be willing to step in as interim chair? Lucian asked. She nodded. It would be my honor. Then, if there's no other business, Lucian said, already moving toward the door, I have somewhere important I need to be. Lucian, Caroline called after him. The board supports you, not just as CEO, but as a person. We hope you can fix things with Noel. He turned back with a small smile. Thank you. That's exactly what I intend to do. When Lucien's car pulled up in front of Noel's mother's house again, it was already dark. This time, when Mrs. James opened the door, her expression was less hostile, more resigned. She still doesn't want to see you, she said. I know, Lucien replied, but I'm not leaving until she does. Mrs. James sighed. Young man, I was married for 30 years before my husband passed. If there's one thing I learned, it's that sometimes the hardest thing isn't fighting for love. It's knowing when to respect someone's wishes, even when it breaks your heart. With all due respect, Mrs. James, Lucien said gently, your daughter taught me that hiding is the easy part. Being brave enough to be seen, really seen, that's the hard part. And right now, I'm being brave enough to stand here and ask for one more chance. The older woman studied him for a long moment, then turned and called over her shoulder. Noel, you might want to come out here. A moment later, Noel appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, and she looked exhausted. The sight of her made Lucien's heart ache with love and regret. I asked you not to come, she said quietly. You also once told me to stop hiding, he reminded her. That's what I'm doing. I'm done hiding, Noel. From the world, from my feelings, from the possibility of getting hurt. He took a step closer. Alexander is gone. The board voted him out after I explained what happened. They support us, support me as CEO, and support my relationship with you. Noel looked surprised but still wary. That's good for you, but it doesn't change the fundamental problem. Your world and mine, they're too different. There will always be people who want to use me to get to you. You're right, Lucian agreed, surprising her. There will be, people will talk, the media will speculate. We'll have to deal with public scrutiny and private doubts. It won't be easy. He reached for her hands, relieved when she didn't pull away. But nothing worth having ever is. You taught me that too. Lucien, let me finish, he interrupted gently. When Emily died, I shut down. I built walls. I decided it was safer not to feel, not to connect, not to risk losing anyone else I loved. For 5 years, I existed but didn't really live. His eyes searched hers, willing her to understand. Then your letter found me, and word by word, page by page, you brought me back to life. You made me brave enough to feel again, to hope again, to love again. Tears welled in Noel's eyes, but she remained silent. I know you're afraid, Lucien continued. Afraid of the attention, afraid of the judgment, afraid of not fitting into my world. But what you don't understand is that you are my world now. The company, the money, the penthouse, None of it means anything without you. He pulled the ring box from his pocket. I asked you a question before, and you weren't ready to answer. I'm asking again now, not because I expect a different answer, but because I want you to know that my question hasn't changed. My love hasn't changed. Lucian dropped to one knee on her mother's porch, opening the box to reveal the diamond ring. Noel James, I love you. I want to build a life with you, whatever kind of life you want, wherever you want it. Will you marry me? Noel looked down at him, tears streaming freely down her face now. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, just as Lucien's hope began to falter, she sank to her knees in front of him. You were right, you know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. In your first letter, you wondered if it was possible to be both terrified of being alone and terrified of letting someone in. It is possible. I know because that's exactly how I feel right now. She reached out to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. I'm so afraid of this, of us, of the future, of how much I love you, but I'm more afraid of walking away from the best thing that's ever happened to me. Her eyes met his, clear and certain despite her tears. Yes, Lucian, I'll marry you. With trembling hands, he slid the ring onto her finger. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he might never let go again. Behind them, Mrs. James quietly closed the front door, giving them their moment of privacy. I promise you, Lucian whispered against Noel's hair, we'll figure this out together. Whatever comes next, we'll face it side by side. Side by side, she agreed, pulling back to look at him. No more hiding, no more running away. Just us being brave enough to be seen. Their lips met in a kiss that felt like a beginning, not just of their engagement, but of a new chapter, a new way of living, a life built not on fear, but on the courage to love completely, without reservation or retreat. As they walked hand in hand back to his car, Noel stopped suddenly. Wait, I almost forgot. She ran back to the house and returned a moment later with a familiar cream-colored envelope. I was going to mail this before. Everything happened. I want you to have it now. Lucian took the envelope, immediately recognizing his name written in her handwriting. Another letter? The last one I wrote before Catherine showed up, Noel explained. I think you should read it. Under the soft glow of the streetlight, Lucian opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. As he read Noel's words, about seeing him outside her apartment, about realizing the price of not being with him was higher than any cost of being together, tears filled his eyes. You wrote this before you knew about Catherine? He asked. Noel nodded. I had already decided, Lucian. I had already chosen us. He pulled her close again, overwhelmed by the knowledge that even before his grand gesture, before his proposal on her mother's porch, she had already found her way back to him, just as he had found his way back to her. I love you, he whispered against her lips. No more letters needed. No more letters, she agreed with a smile. Just us, in person, for real. As they drove away from her mother's house, toward a future neither of them could have imagined when his first letter had accidentally found its way to her door, both felt the same certainty. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Not as ghosts hiding from life, but as two people brave enough to be fully seen, by each other and by the world. The weeks following Lucian and Noel's engagement passed in a whirlwind. After their emotional reunion on her mother's porch, they had stayed the night at Mrs. James's house, talking late into the evening about their future. By morning, decisions had been made that would reshape both their lives. Are you sure about this? Noel asked as they sat at her mother's kitchen table, sipping coffee and making plans. It's a big change. I've never been more sure of anything, Lucian replied, squeezing her hand. The penthouse never felt like home anyway. Their first decision had been where to live. Instead of Noel moving into Lucien's sterile penthouse or staying in her small Brooklyn apartment, they decided to find a new place together, somewhere that would be truly theirs, a fresh start. Their second decision had been about timing. Despite the whirlwind nature of their relationship, neither wanted a long engagement. Life is too short to wait when you know what you want, Lucian had said, the memory of Emily never far from his mind. Noel had agreed, remembering her mother's illness and how it had taught her the same lesson about the fragility of time. Now on a crisp Saturday morning 3 weeks later, they stood in the empty living room of a brownstone in Park Slope, Brooklyn. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting warm patterns across the hardwood floors. It's perfect, Noel breathed, turning slowly to take in the space. Big enough to not feel cramped but still cozy, and that reading nook by the window. Lucian watched her with a smile, joy spreading through his chest at her excitement. "So this is the one? If you like it too," she said, suddenly concerned. "I know it's not as luxurious as what you're used to." "What I'm used to is an empty penthouse that feels like a hotel," he replied. "This feels like it could be a home. Our home." The real estate agent, who had been giving them space to explore, approached with a pleased expression. "Shall I draw up the papers?" 2 hours later, they signed the documents making the brownstone theirs. As they stepped outside onto the tree-lined street, Lucian pulled Noel close for a kiss. "Happy?" he asked. "Very," she assured him. "Though I'm still not sure why you insisted on putting my name on the deed. You're the one paying for it." "Because it's ours," Lucian said simply. "Everything of mine is yours now, and everything of yours is mine. That's how this works." Noel rested her head against his shoulder as they walked to the car. "I never thought I'd be engaged to a billionaire who wants to live in Brooklyn." "Former billionaire," Lucian corrected with a grin. "After the announcement, my net worth might drop to a mere several hundred million." Noel laughed, but there was nervousness beneath it. Tomorrow, Lucian would be holding a press conference to announce significant changes at Mindwell Technologies. They had discussed every detail, prepared for every possible reaction, but still, anxiety lingered. "Are you having second thoughts?" Lucian asked, sensing her tension. "Not about us," she assured him quickly. "Never about us. Just about how the world will react." "Let them react," he said with a shrug. "What matters is that we know why we're doing this. Everything else is just noise." The next morning, Mindwell's largest conference room was packed with reporters and cameras. At exactly 10 a.m., Lucian walked in with Noel by his side. He had insisted that she be there with him, not hidden away as if their relationship was something to be ashamed of. Margaret had arranged the seating, positioning friendly journalists in the front rows. Caroline Bennett, the new board chairwoman, sat off to one side, her presence a visible show of board support. As Lucian stepped up to the podium, a hush fell over the room. Noel squeezed his hand once before taking her seat in the front row. "Good morning," Lucian began, his voice steady and clear. "Thank you all for coming. I have several announcements to make today, both personal and professional." He took a breath, his eyes finding Noel's for a brief, grounding moment. "First, I'm pleased to announce that Noel James and I are engaged to be married." A murmur ran through the crowd, and camera flashes erupted. "We're planning a small ceremony next month." Lucian waited for the commotion to settle before continuing. "Second, effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO of Mindwell Technologies." The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Reporters half rose from their seats, questions flying from all directions. Lucian held up his hands for quiet. "This is not a decision I've made lightly, nor is it a decision made under pressure from the board. In fact, the board has been incredibly supportive and initially tried to talk me out of it." He nodded toward Caroline, who smiled in confirmation. "I founded Mindwell after a personal tragedy, the loss of my sister Emily to suicide. For years, building this company has been my way of trying to atone for not being there when she needed me most. It's been my entire focus, my identity, my purpose." Lucien's voice softened. "But recently I've realized there's more to life than work, no matter how meaningful that work might be. I've realized that healing doesn't come from success or wealth or professional accomplishments. It comes from connection, from love, from allowing yourself to be fully present in your own life." His eyes found Noel again, drawing strength from her proud smile. "I'm not leaving Mindwell entirely," he clarified. "I'll be transitioning to the role of chairman of the Mindwell Foundation, our non-profit arm focused on mental health research and suicide prevention. This will allow me to continue the work that matters most to me while creating better balance in my life." A reporter's hand shot up. "Who will take over as CEO?" "The board has unanimously approved Margaret Chen as my successor," Lucian announced, gesturing toward Margaret, who stood with dignified composure at the side of the room. "Many of you know her as my executive assistant, but few know that she has an MBA from Wharton and has been my right hand in every strategic decision for the past 5 years. No one understands this company better, and no one is better equipped to lead it into the future." More questions came rapid fire, and Lucian answered each with calm clarity. Yes, he would retain his ownership stake in the company. No, his decision had nothing to do with the recent board shakeup. Yes, he had complete confidence in Margaret's leadership abilities. Finally, a reporter from a prominent business magazine asked the question Lucian had been waiting for. "Mr. Hart, there have been rumors that your relationship with Ms. James given her past connection to MindSync, created a conflict of interest. Did that factor into your decision to step down? Lucian leaned into the microphone, his voice firm. Let me be very clear about this. Noel James has no connection to MindSync beyond a relationship that ended years before she and I ever met. She has never had access to Mindwell proprietary information, nor would she have any interest in it if she did. My decision to transition to a new role is about creating a life that better reflects my priorities, not about appeasing critics or responding to baseless rumors. He stepped back from the podium. Now, I'd like to introduce you to the new CEO of Mindwell Technologies, Margaret Chen. As Margaret took his place, Lucian sat down beside Noel, taking her hand in his. How did I do? He whispered. Perfectly, she assured him, her eyes shining with pride and love. Later, as they left the press conference, reporters shouted questions at Noel. She had expected to feel overwhelmed, to want to hide from the attention. Instead, with Lucien's hand firmly in hers, she found herself stopping to answer. Miss James, how does it feel to be engaged to one of the country's most eligible bachelors? Noel smiled. It feels like finding someone who sees me completely and loves me anyway. I think that's what everyone hopes for, regardless of wealth or status. Do you think your backgrounds are too different to make a marriage work? Our backgrounds shaped us, but they don't define us, she replied thoughtfully. What defines us is how we choose to move forward together. In the car afterward, Lucienne wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You're a natural. I thought you were afraid of the public attention. I was, she admitted. Maybe I still am a little, but hiding from it only gives it more power. You taught me that. He looked at her with surprise. I did. When you decided to tell the board about Emily, when you stood up to Alexander, when you came to my mother's house and refused to give up on us. She touched his face gently. You showed me what courage looks like. Lucian turned his head to kiss her palm. I had a good teacher. The story of the reclusive billionaire CEO stepping down for love became the talk of the business world. Some analysts predicted disaster for Mindwell without Lucian at the helm. Others praised the move as visionary, a recognition that leadership succession was healthy for growing companies. But away from the speculation and commentary, Lucian and Noel were building their life together. They moved into the brownstone as soon as the paperwork was completed, spending weekends painting walls and arranging furniture. Lucian discovered an unexpected talent for home improvement projects, while Noel transformed the third bedroom into a cozy library filled with books from both their collections. I never thought I'd see the day when Lucian Hart would be wearing jeans and painting a kitchen ceiling, Margaret commented during one of her frequent visits. Since taking over as CEO, she had become a close friend, often joining them for dinner to discuss company developments. Neither did I, Lucian admitted with a laugh, but I've never been happier. It was true. The weight he had carried for years, the guilt over Emily, the pressure of running the company, the isolation he had imposed on himself, had gradually lifted. In its place was a lightness, a presence, a joy in the simple moments of everyday life. Noel, too, was flourishing. After the initial shock of media attention following their engagement, she had returned to teaching with a new confidence. Her students, far from being distracted by her famous fiancé, seemed inspired by the real-life love story unfolding before them. Ms. James, are you going to keep teaching after you're married? Zoe had asked during class one day. Absolutely, Noel had replied without hesitation. Teaching poetry is my passion. Getting married doesn't change that. And it didn't. Even as wedding preparations ramped up, Noel remained dedicated to her students, finding that her relationship with Lucian had deepened her understanding of the emotional truths in the poems she taught. One evening, about 2 weeks before the wedding, Lucian arrived home to find Noel sitting on the floor of their library, surrounded by boxes. What's all this? He asked, setting down his briefcase. He had spent the day at the foundation, reviewing grant proposals for mental health research projects. I was organizing some things and found these, Noel explained, holding up a bundle of cream-colored envelopes tied with a ribbon. Your letters. Lucian sat down beside her, picking up the matching bundle of blue envelopes. And yours. I was wondering where these had ended up in the movie. I've been rereading them, Noel said, her eyes soft with memory. It's strange to think how much has changed since that first letter accidentally found its way to me. Everything has changed, Lucian agreed, pulling her closer. And nothing has changed. The man who wrote those letters is still me, still in love with you, still amazed that you love him back. Noel leaned her head against his shoulder. I had an idea. What if we read these at the wedding? Not all of them, obviously, but select parts, as our vows. Lucian considered the suggestion. Share our most private thoughts with our wedding guests. Too much? Noel asked, suddenly uncertain. No, he said slowly. Actually, I think it's perfect. Those letters were the most honest expression of who we are and what we mean to each other. What better foundation for marriage vows? They spent the evening selecting passages, laughing and sometimes crying as they revisited the words that had brought them together. The raw vulnerability of Lucian's first letter, the compassionate understanding of Noel's response, the gradual unfolding of their hearts on paper, page by page, letter by letter. We should keep these safe, Lucian said, as they carefully returned the letters to their boxes. For our children someday, so they'll know how we found each other. Noel looked up in surprise. Children? We haven't really talked about that. Do you want them? Lucian asked, suddenly nervous. I just assumed. I do, she assured him quickly. I've always wanted a family. I just wasn't sure if you did. With you? Lucian said, pulling her into his arms. I want everything with you, Noel. The whole messy, beautiful, ordinary, extraordinary life. Their wedding day dawned clear and bright, a perfect October Saturday. They had chosen a small venue, a renovated boathouse on the edge of Prospect Park, with large windows overlooking the lake. Only 60 guests had been invited. Close friends, family, a few colleagues from both their workplaces. In a room upstairs, Noel stood in front of a mirror as her mother adjusted her veil. She had chosen a simple gown of ivory satin that skimmed her curves and caught the light as she moved. You look beautiful, sweetheart, Mrs. James said, blinking back tears. Your father would have been so proud. Noel touched the small locket around her neck, her father's gift to her on her 16th birthday, the last birthday before he passed away. I wish he could be here. He is, in his way, her mother assured her. In your smile, in your strength, in the way you love so completely. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Vanessa, Noel's colleague and bridesmaid, peeked in. It's time, honey. Everyone's ready. Downstairs, guests were seated in white chairs facing the windows where the lake sparkled in the autumn sunlight. Lucian stood at the front, looking handsome and slightly nervous in a dark blue suit. Margaret stood beside him as his best woman, while David Chen from the board and a few other close friends filled out the wedding party. When the music began and Noel appeared at the back of the room on her mother's arm, Lucian felt his breath catch. She was radiant, her face glowing with happiness as their eyes met across the room. In that moment, every obstacle they had overcome, every doubt they had faced, every fear they had conquered, seemed worth it for this single perfect moment of certainty. As Noel reached him, Lucian took her hands in his, unable to look away from her eyes. We've prepared our own vows, Noel explained to the guests as the minister stepped back. Or rather, we're sharing portions of the letters that brought us together in the first place. Lucian went first, unfolding a cream-colored paper that matched his original stationery. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be known, really known, by another person, he read, his voice steady despite the emotion filling his chest. To let someone see all the jagged edges and still choose to stay, but I'm afraid that kind of love doesn't exist for someone like me. He looked up at Noel, his eyes filled with wonder. I was wrong. That kind of love does exist. You showed me that. You saw every broken piece, every scar, every fear, and you chose to stay. You chose me, and I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that choice. I promise to love you completely, honestly, without reservation or retreat. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your safe harbor in every storm. I promise to never hide from you, to always let you see me exactly as I am. Tears slipped down Noel's cheeks as she unfolded her own blue paper. To whoever you are, you're not unlovable. You're just hiding too well, she read, her voice soft but clear. I know because I've been hiding too. It's safer behind walls, isn't it? No one can hurt you there, but no one can love you there either. She looked into Lucien's eyes, her heart overflowing with love. You found me behind my walls. Your words reached places in my heart I thought were closed forever, and in loving you, I found the courage to love myself again, to believe in possibilities I had given up on. I promise to be your steady ground when the world feels unsteady. I promise to remind you of your strength when you forget it. I promise to choose you every day in all the small moments that make up a life together. I promise to never let you hide again, to always see you completely and love all that I see. There wasn't a dry eye in the room as they exchanged rings. Simple platinum bands inscribed with the words No more hiding on the inside. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was both tender and passionate, a promise and a celebration all at once. The reception that followed was joyful and relaxed. Under twinkling lights strung across the boathouse ceiling, they danced their first dance to a song about finding home in another person's arms. Lucian surprised Noel by singing the last chorus softly in her ear, a hidden talent she hadn't known about until that moment. As the evening progressed, they circulated among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes. Caroline Bennett raised a toast to the couple, speaking warmly of how their love had transformed not just their own lives, but the culture of Mindwell itself. Under Margaret's leadership, and with Lucian's continued guidance at the foundation, we've become a company that values balance, that recognizes the importance of human connection alongside technological innovation, she said, raising her glass. And we have Noel to thank for reminding us all of what truly matters. Later, as they shared a quiet moment on the deck overlooking the darkened lake, Lucien wrapped his arms around Noel from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy?" he asked, echoing the question he had asked after they bought the brownstone. "More than I knew was possible," she replied, leaning back against him. "You?" "Complete," he said simply. "For the first time in my life, I feel complete." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the reflection of stars on the water, each lost in thoughts of the journey that had brought them to this moment. "It's strange," Noel said finally. "If your assistant hadn't accidentally mailed that letter, if it hadn't somehow found its way to my door with the wrong address." "I've thought about that too," Lucien admitted. "All the random chances that had to align perfectly. It seems impossible. Or meant to be," Noel suggested, turning in his arms to face him. "Maybe some connections are just inevitable. Maybe we would have found each other somehow, even without the letters." "Maybe," Lucian agreed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But I'm glad it happened the way it did. Those letters let us know each other's hearts before we ever met in person. They created a foundation nothing could shake. Not even corporate sabotage and media scandals," Noel said with a soft laugh. "Not even that," Lucien agreed, his eyes growing serious. "I need you to know something, Noel. What I said today in my vows, about never hiding from you, about always letting you see me exactly as I am, that wasn't just a pretty line. That's my promise for our life together. No more walls, no more isolation, just us, facing whatever comes, side by side." "Side by side," she echoed, sealing the promise with a kiss. 1 year later, Lucienne stood in the doorway of their brownstone's library, watching Noel as she sat in the window seat, her rounded belly visible beneath her flowing dress. She was reading aloud from a book of poetry, one hand resting on her stomach, as if the baby inside could hear and understand the cadence of the verses. So much had changed in a year. Margaret had exceeded all expectations as CEO, leading Mindwell to its most successful year yet. The Mindwell Foundation, under Lucien's guidance, had launched groundbreaking research projects and awareness campaigns. Noel had taken a sabbatical from teaching to focus on her pregnancy and on the poetry collection she was finally writing. But the most profound changes had been internal. The man who had once hidden from the world now hosted dinner parties for friends in their home. The woman who had once doubted her worth now spoke confidently at mental health awareness events, sharing her own experiences with heartbreak and healing. "Hey," Noel said, noticing him in the doorway. "How long have you been standing there?" "Not long," Lucian replied, crossing the room to join her on the window seat. "You looked so beautiful. I didn't want to interrupt." He placed a hand on her belly, smiling as he felt a strong kick against his palm. "Active today, isn't she?" "Very," Noel confirmed with a laugh. "I think she's going to be a dancer, or maybe a kickboxer." Lucien's phone buzzed with a notification, but he ignored it, focusing instead on the moment at hand, his wife, their child growing inside her, the peaceful library filled with afternoon light. "You can check that," Noel said, noticing his phone. "It might be important." "Nothing is more important than this," Lucian replied, switching his phone to silent and setting it aside. "Being here, being present, something I'm still learning." Noel leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You're better at it than you think. Emily would be proud of you." Lucian smiled at the mention of his sister. In the past, her name had always brought pain. Now, while the sadness remained, it was tempered with healing, with the knowledge that her memory was honored in his work and would be shared with his daughter. "I got a letter today," he said after a moment. "An actual paper letter in the mail. From a teenager who found help through one of the Foundation's programs, she said she had been considering suicide until she read my story about Emily and found our resources. "That's wonderful," Noel said, squeezing his hand. "It made me think about how powerful words can be," Lucian continued. "How the right words at the right time can change everything, can save a life, or find a heart," Noel added softly, thinking of their own story. "Exactly." Lucian placed a gentle hand on her belly again. "I want our daughter to know that, to understand the power of reaching out, of being honest, of letting herself be seen." "She will," Noel assured him. "We'll teach her, every day, in how we love each other, in how we love her." As the afternoon light bathed them in its golden glow, Lucian marveled at the fullness of his life. Not the kind of fullness that came from achievement or wealth or success, though he had all of those, but the fullness that came from connection, from vulnerability, from love freely given and received. He thought of that first letter, written in the darkness of a sleepless night, addressed to no one and everyone, how it had found its way to the one person who could understand his broken places, how it had begun a correspondence that became a conversation that became a life together. "What are you thinking about?" Noel asked, noticing his contemplative expression. "About letters," Lucian replied with a smile, "and how sometimes the words we send into the void find exactly where they need to go." Noel returned his smile, understanding completely, because that was the miracle of their love, the perfect comprehension of one heart by another, across all distances, against all odds. Outside their window, autumn leaves danced on the breeze, golden and bright with possibility. Inside, in the warmth of their embrace, the future was already unfolding, one page, one word, one heartbeat at a time. The end.